Hey class, I want to talk specifically about the first essay because I'm sure that's the thing in the forefront of your minds this week is how to get that done. So the first thing I want to look at is just I pulled the prompt off of the assignment. The assignment sheet itself is much longer and talks about strategies and things that you should be doing for the paper. The main question or two questions that are asked that you're asked to take a position on are what makes a greater contribution to our success, the people who mentor or help us, or the work we put into developing our own success. And you're being asked to take a position, right? You're being asked to say what you believe, one side or the other, um, of that prompt. And in during week 2, I had you do a lot of work that should help you to do a good job with this essay assignment. So you read chapter 1 of Outliers, the Matthew Effect, which is um, Gladwell taking a contrarian position against the commonly held belief that we are largely responsible for our own success. Gladwell says, well, hey, hold on. I don't think that's what's going on here. And you annotated that chapter, you processed your notes, so hopefully you have a really good handle on it. And we read They Say I Say chapter 2, which was about the art of summary. So that should help you to summarize Gladwell, who would be your They Say in your paper. Okay, so summarizing his ideas from chapter 1. And then I had you do some writing activities such as the thesis exercise, the brainstorming activity, and the plagiarism lesson. The brainstorming activity could directly be writing that you may use in your paper. The thesis exercise and the plagiarism lesson are more designed to, the thesis exercise will help you to understand what a good thesis might look like, and the plagiarism lesson was designed to help you to avoid plagiarizing. So let me talk a little more concretely just about structure in the essay. Okay, it the assignment sheet says something like 600 words, which is about 2 pages. It's a shorter essay, um, and the way to think about any essay is that it's going to have an introduction, it's going to have some body paragraphs, and it's going to have a conclusion. Um, in your intro, this is just kind of an overview of the things that you should do in each section of the paper. So in an introduction, it's always good to hook the reader, to bring the reader in, to engage them and get them to want to read the rest of your essay. You then want to provide context, which is what is the conversation you're entering, what is who are the writers you're responding to, what are their main ideas, and then you want to end your introduction with your thesis, which is your main idea for your paper. In your body paragraph, you should think about the body paragraph lesson from week 1, where you're trying to have a topic sentence, supporting details, transitions, and a concluding sentence in each of your body paragraphs. Chapter 3 of They Say I Say talked about, quote, how to do quotation, and quotation is something that you can use as supporting detail to back up your claims in your body paragraphs. So that's how chapter 3 and being able to use quotes effectively is going to help you with this paper. Um, and I also say here that purpose will tell you your structure. And what I mean by that is that sometimes it's hard to know if I need 2 body paragraphs or 3 or 4. And the way to determine that is to think about how many things I need to do. Okay, if I need to do a summary of somebody else's ideas, maybe that's 1 paragraph. And then if I need to respond, do I have one reason or multiple reasons? And that may determine if I have 1 paragraph of I say, or 2 paragraphs, or 3 paragraphs of I say. And I'm going to talk about that a little more later on in this slideshow. And then your conclusion is these are the 3 things I tell students in a conclusion. You should reiterate your thesis. You don't want to restate it in exact words, but you do want to, restate it, basically, paraphrase it, put it another way. And then you should add something new, and I'm going to talk about what that might be in a little bit. And then bookend the hook means to come back to the hook. And after I show you the different ways that you can do a hook, I'll show you how you would do that. So when you're doing that hook, right, here's a bunch of different strategies that you can use to bring your reader in. You can start with a quote, which could be from Gladwell, or it could be a quote about success or something like that, since that's the topic of the paper. You could start with something puzzling or something that researchers are trying to figure out the answer to that might draw your readers in because they want to know the answer. You could start with an anecdote or a story, something that connects to your main idea, to the thing that you're talking about. A provocative fact or statistic can always be really good if it's something that surprises somebody, like, huh, I wouldn't have thought it was that high of a percentage of people who, do whatever the thing is that you're talking about. Um, a lot of students like to start with a question. I will say that if you do start with a question, make sure it's not a question where the answer is yes or no, because a lot of times if the answer is no, that means the reader may no longer want to read your paper. So if you start with a question like, have you ever thought about success? And they're like, no, like they don't care, then that may just not be a gripping question for them. So it should be a question that forces them to answer in a different way than yes and no, besides yes and no. Some people will jump right into the background or context, so jumping into like the they say, and that can work sometimes. You can also do an analogy where you compare what you're talking about to something else, or you can start with a definition of the thing that you're talking about. And then you'll go into the context, right? So what's the conversation you're entering into? Who are the people, or who's the person you're responding to? In this case, it's really Gladwell, or in Gladwell's case, he's responding to the general belief that we are responsible for our own success. You would want to introduce the titles of the texts that you're going to be talking about. So in this case, you're going to be talking about outliers, and specifically chapter 1, and you would want to make sure that's clear in the introduction. And you want to make clear what the ideas are of the people who are in this conversation, right? So this would be a place where you might have a one-sentence summary of the main idea of the first chapter of Outliers. And then at the end of your intro, you want to get to your thesis. So a thesis statement, as you learned last week, is a focused statement of your main idea. It needs to be very specific. It should also be debatable, a point that somebody could disagree with, and you need to be able to support it, right? So, that just means you have to have evidence that's going to back up your claim. So when you get to your body paragraphs, you then need to think about how to organize them and how to develop them. Organization has to do with like the flow of the paragraphs and the order of the paragraphs. Development has to do with like each paragraph having enough material in it to make it effective at what it's trying to do. So that's where like the 11 sentences that I keep kind of harping on comes in. And like I said, it doesn't always have to be 11 sentences, but the idea is it should have a topic sentence, it should have major and minor supporting details, and a concluding sentence. And what will probably vary is the number of major and minor details that you have from paragraph to paragraph. So there are a few ways that you might order and organize your body paragraphs for this paper. After your introduction, you might start by summarizing Gladwell and his ideas, and then you could follow that up with a paragraph or two where you're responding to his ideas, where you're doing your I say. So one possible structure for this paper would be to move from summary into response. Another way to do it would be to mix the they say and the I say. So, you'd still have your thesis at the end of your introduction, but then your body paragraphs might break Gladwell's ideas into parts. So you might have a paragraph where you talk about one aspect of Gladwell's argument and then agree and disagree with it. And then you might have a second paragraph that takes another element. It's almost like you're taking his summary and breaking it. It's like you're taking your summary of Gladwell's ideas and breaking it into pieces and responding to each piece. Okay. So that's just another way that you might go about the paper, is taking his key ideas, his key pieces of support for his main idea, and talking about why you agree or disagree with each of those. So that's a second approach that you might take. And then in your conclusion, like I said, you want to return to your thesis, and then I want to talk about just a little bit how you could add something. So I often tell students there's like 3 strategies. One is you can kind of predict the future based on where we are at in the subject you're talking about. So in this case, sometimes that's like used more so with I don't know, something where like we're saying like, if we don't deal with this problem, this is what's going to happen in the future. But in your case, you could talk about like what's the future going to look like if we don't follow Gladwell's advice and start thinking about success differently. You can talk about the broader implication or implications. What this means is we're talking about success in a relatively like small. Um, we're talking about success in your paper. You're talking about yourself, right? So then the broader implication is like, what is this argument? How does this matter for everyone? Like for society as a whole, or something like that. So the broader implication is you take what you're talking about and apply it to a larger context. And then another approach is to solve a problem. Like if your paper has pointed out a problem, like say you're writing about global warming, you might like solve talk about like strategies to solve the problem in the conclusion would be the example that I give. And then you want to bookend your hook, right? So if you started with a provocative statistic, you might come back to that statistic. If you started with a story, you might finish with by finishing the story or by explaining the relevance of the story. Bookending the hook means coming back to the beginning of the paper, and it signals to the reader that you're wrapping up, that you're coming back to the beginning, and you've come full circle. And I just want to talk briefly about what resources you have. So you've already done some writing for this paper, as I said earlier, right? So a lot of the work you did in week 2 was designed to get this paper going, okay? So you wrote a summary of the Matthew effect. You also contributed to a discussion thread of birthday cutoffs where you might have talked there about some ideas that might be relevant and you might be able to bring into your paper. And you also did the brainstorm, which may have produced information that you can use in your essay. And then you also have your textbook, They Say, I Say. So you've now, this week you will read chapter 3. And at that point, you'll have read the entirety of the first 3 chapters, which are the They Say the They Say section of the book. So chapter 1 talks about how to start with what others are saying, how to incorporate a They Say. Chapter 2 talks about particular strategies for summarizing, which could be useful here clearly. And then chapter 3 teaches you how to quote effectively, so how to incorporate quotes. And that's a very important aspect of summarizing, right? So in the first paper, I'm going to want to see you incorporate quotes from outliers into your paper. And then the other thing I wanted to point out is at the end of the book, there's an index of templates, which is very helpful. So you'll see there, it'll list, it has all the same templates that are spread throughout the book, but it's just the templates without the text, right? So you might want to use some of the templates there for introducing the They Say or introducing an ongoing debate. You might want to use some of the templates for introducing and explaining quotations. And there are also templates for agreeing and disagreeing. So those would help you with your I say. And then there's also a really nice list of transition phrases. It gives you like 8 different ways to introduce an example, to show cause and effect. So those transitions can be really useful because, as you remember when we did body paragraphs, I said one of the things a good body paragraph does is it uses transitions to move the reader from idea to idea. So that's it for this week for the paper. If you have questions, definitely get in touch with me. We'll be doing peer review, so you'll get feedback from a couple of your classmates. Then you're going to submit the paper, and then which will be next week. And then at that point, I'll give you feedback, and you'll still have another shot to revise. Okay. Good luck.